Hi again. We're in the middle of John Wesley's reaction to the American Revolution. Letters he's writing back and forth to both his brother and administrators in 1775. But meanwhile, in the autumn of 1775 had appeared Wesley's calm address to our American colonies. This treatise everyone has heard of, and on 10,000 occasions has it been used as a stick to beat Wesley's back. Certainly it represents a change of front as to the oppression of the colonials and the legal right of their demands. He here tells the Americans that the laws against which they were revolting are just, and that the taxes they refuse to pay are moderate and fair. Here Wesley's subconscious traditional Toryism reasserts itself in robust form. Yet his changed attitude represents more than traditional prejudice or patriotic fervor. It is a remarkable fact that much recent disinterested research, American and English, is sharply revising the long dominant assumption that the colonial malcontents were wholly in the right, and that the English Tories, then controlling Parliament, were all vindictive tyrants. But dropping this thorny problem, what caused Wesley's altered attitude? Did he arbitrarily change front? Were the charges of inconsistency, even of sycophancy, now hurled against him, rooted in truth? First, it must be remembered that when the calm address was written, every chance of pacific settlement had passed. War had come, and war to men of action means yea or nay. Meanwhile, too, Wesley had read Dr. Johnson's, that Samuel Johnson's brilliant and plausible treatise, Taxation, No Tyranny, and was profoundly impressed. Indeed, his thesis in the calm address is a popular adaptation of Johnson's argument. So, as Wesley thought he had received light from Johnson's treatise, he believed it his duty to enlighten others, for he now was convinced that colonial slogans had been largely misleading. Britain's victory in the 7 Years' War, Wesley was persuaded, had won for the English colonies complete geographical safety. So why should they now refuse to help with the cost of that war? Other considerations also prevailed. Tom Paine, the English skeptic, was now in America stirring up agitation, and Wesley judged Paine a pernicious influence. He deplored too the fact that English legal officers and loyalist settlers were being roughly handled, and that smuggling was being encouraged as a means of flouting English authority. But most of all, he was offended by certain revolutionists who cried loudly for liberty while they themselves were slave owners, for to him slavery was the execrable villainy. When therefore the crisis came, Wesley's attachment to parliamentary methods made him a defender of what he considered the cause of law and order, even though then that cause was badly represented. Indeed, England's protracted bungling of a delicate situation he still deplored, but revolutionary methods he deplored more, hence the famous calm address. But two vital matters Wesley failed to comprehend. One was the American Puritan's memory of what his forefathers had suffered at the hands of successive oligarchical governments in England. The other was that the revival, of which he and Whitefield were the central characters, had proved a major force in creating the spirit of independence and in fitting men to exercise it with integrity. As for the charges of plagiarism and sycophancy, they need not detain us. Dr. Johnson, far from being offended at Wesley's use of his arguments, was flattered. To have gained such a mind as yours, the doctor wrote to Wesley, may justly confirm me in my own opinion. The lecturer was surely in the right who, though he saw his audience slinking away, refused to quit the chair while Plato stayed. End of quote. Concerning the sycophancy charges, Wesley's letter to Lloyd's Evening Post is illuminating. The said address, he answered his assailants, was written, quote, not to please any man living, high or low. I know mankind too well. I know that they who love you for political service love you less than their dinner, and they that hate you worse than the devil. End of quote. The American revolt, Wesley averred, had been largely incited by letters from England. The colonials had been advised by political malcontents in the homeland to seize upon all the king's offices, and were told that if they stood valiantly for 6 months, there would be such commotions in England that they might have their own terms. The flame of insurrection, Wesley contended, rages all over England. Many were pouring oil into the flame. He wrote to contribute his mite toward putting out the fire. Wesley's prediction that an American rebellion would spread to war with France and Spain proved correct. He knew well that such an event would threaten every foundation of British influence throughout the globe, and he believed that England, for all her sins, was more worthy to guard the high seas and to exercise far-flung colonial influence than either France or Spain, her then envious rivals. His abhorrence of war was unchanging. He did everything in his power to prevent the outbreak of the American Revolution, but when the war came, he supported the government. His calm address and his correlated treatises ran into a circulation of scores of thousands. And this support to an England honeycombed with dissension at home, facing defeat in America, and pushed to the wall by France, Spain, and Holland at Gibraltar and the Far East, did much to save the empire from complete disruption. Little wonder, however, that Wesley was violently maligned as a government pensioner and turncoat. For striving to present the case of each side to the other, he became a common target of abuse. And certain it is that some of his publications made the wartime situation doubly difficult for his preachers on American soil. This particular situation, Whitefield, had he lived long enough, would have handled with a finer understanding of America than was shown by the greater evangelist. Next time, the use and abuse of money and privilege. Put in a link to a discussion by Manfred Brauch of the superior authorities, Romans 13.